it be like to know, without a doubt, that you are loved, truly, passionately, deeply, just as you are, in spite of the mistakes you've made in life? Hi, I'm Shannon Ethridge, author of the best-selling Every Woman's Battle series from Waterbrook Press. As a writer, speaker, and lay counselor, I long to help women of all ages discover the joy of pursuing a mad, passionate love relationship with the Lord, rather than looking for love in all the wrong places. Today, I'd like to tell you about a powerful new 5-book series I've written called Loving Jesus Without Limits. In the lead book, Completely His, I share for the first time in writing the story of my greatest face-to-face encounter with the lover of my soul. It was the third day of my junior year in high school. I can still remember getting ready that morning of August 29, 1984. It was a 10-mile drive to school from our house in the country. I drove down the highway that would take me to the interstate. However, I never made it to the interstate that particular morning. I took my eyes off the road for just a moment, adjusting my rearview mirror to put lipstick on, and I caught a glimpse of something on the side of the road and then felt my car jolt suddenly. In a split second, I realized I had hit something. I thought maybe it was a farm animal out of its pasture, but I had a sinking feeling it was something much worse. As I unbuckled my seatbelt and ran back several yards to see what I'd hit, my sinking feeling was confirmed. I stood trembling in shock over the body of a curly-headed woman lying face down in the grass next to a mangled bicycle. I wanted to turn her over to see if I could help her, but I knew that I could not waste precious time in calling for an ambulance. So I ran and knocked on the door of a nearby house. An elderly man quickly stepped aside and pointed to his phone, and I frantically dialed 911 for an ambulance. And then I called my mom and asked her to drive down the road until she saw me. At this point, I couldn't bring myself to tell her anything else. Within a couple of minutes, my mother arrived, and I tried to pull myself together as she ran toward me with her own tears of panic. And as we waited for help to arrive, all I could think about was that I had just hit someone else's mother, someone's daughter, someone's wife, and how would I ever face her family after what I'd just done? 45 minutes later, the ambulance finally arrived. The paramedic examined the woman, but then announced that she'd most likely been killed on impact. He coldly explained that we'd have to call a funeral home ambulance instead. And I felt as if the past 45 minutes of hoping and praying had been in vain. I eventually left the scene, not even knowing who she was. And the next 2 hours were a complete blur. I remember collapsing on the living room sofa, sobbing, and then waking up later when a policeman knocked on the door asking to question me. I kept thinking, this wreck was all my fault. I should have been the one killed, not her. And terrified of facing this woman's family, I considered suicide more than once that afternoon. After the officer left, I went outside to review the damage to my car, and it seemed as if an invisible shield of protection had been around that driver's seat. And at that moment, I sensed God had placed a hedge of protection around me. Wondering if he had perhaps spared me for a reason, I vowed not to commit suicide, regardless of how painful facing this woman's family may be. Later, a man called to inform me that the woman's name was Marjorie Jarstfer, and that he was her neighbor. He also informed me that he and his pastor had driven to McKinney, Texas, to tell Gary Jarstfer that his wife had been killed in a car accident. The caller said, "Shannon, I want you to know that Gary's immediate response was, 'How is the girl? Was she hurt? Does she know it's not her fault?'" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could this man's first response to such devastating news be concern for me, the one responsible for his pain? How could he even think of me when I had just taken his wife from him? I was even more stunned to hear that Gary wanted me to come to his home and meet his family the night before the funeral. An invitation I wanted to decline, but knew that I couldn't. As I entered the house, I looked down the entry corridor to see a big, burly, middle-aged man coming toward me, not with animosity in his eyes, but with his arms open wide. Gary Jarstfer scooped me up in the warmest embrace and the tears that I had been fighting back were now flowing onto his flannel shirt, with his own tears flowing onto the top of my head. And I couldn't stop repeating, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. Once we regained our composure, Gary introduced me to his pastor and 2 of his adult children. And then he took me by the hand over to a window seat in his living room and proceeded to tell me things that he wanted me to know about Marjorie's life. He said, Shannon, my wife was such a godly woman, and we have served many years with Wycliffe Bible translators, and there was no limit to how much Marjorie loved the Lord. She had a very close, intimate walk with God, so much so that she's actually been telling me for a while that she sensed the Lord would be calling her home soon. Gary had my full attention as I tried to wrap my brain around the idea that someone could be so close to God that she would actually know when her time on earth was about to expire. But what followed astounded me even further. As Gary continued, Shannon, God was ready to take Marjorie home, and he chose you to usher her into heaven because he knew you would be strong enough to handle this. He wants to use you, Shannon, for his glory. As a matter of fact, he said, I'm passing Marjorie's legacy of being a godly woman onto you. I want you to also love Jesus without limits, just like Marjorie did. When Gary Jarsper said these things to me, I had no idea what they really meant. I was just a 16-year-old girl who'd been going from guy to guy, looking for love in all the wrong places. When he challenged me to love Jesus without limits, I hadn't a clue how to walk that out. But I knew that there was something wonderful about both Gary and Marjorie's love relationship with the Lord. And I wanted to experience that kind of intimacy with my Creator as well. God took this horrific event and he turned it into something absolutely beautiful and even life-transforming. This lavish love that I experienced became an anchor in my life as I sailed through many more stormy relationships. Fortunately, I finally found true love, not in the arms of some guy, but in the arms of my God. Because of my continued relationship with the Jarsper family, I gradually went from feeling to blame to feeling chosen to carry the mantle of being a godly woman who loves Jesus beyond measure, not just with her lips, but with her life. However, as with most Christians, I've had to learn to love like that. It wasn't something that came naturally. Learning to recognize and embrace my role as the beloved bride of Christ has been a long process that continues to this day. A process I'd like to walk you through in my new book, Completely His, Loving Jesus Without Limits, as well as the 4 devotionals that follow, entitled Completely Loved, Recognizing God's Passionate Pursuit of Us, Completely Forgiven, Responding to God's Transforming Grace, Completely Blessed, Discovering God's Extraordinary Gifts, and Completely Irresistible, Drawing Others toward God's Extravagant Love. As you allow yourself to become completely His, I pray you'll also come to relish your role as the beloved bride of Christ. Let us never stop learning more and more about how to love Jesus without limits.